Hi, Inner Peacemaker. My name is Cassandra Kimball, and this is the Inner Peacemaker Parent Podcast, episode 57, When the Negative Part of You Feels Loud Inside. My husband and I don't know much about plants. I very humbly am saying that. We've done a couple of tiny gardens, and we have successfully grown a few things. Zucchini sometimes have been amazing. A couple tomato plants have we've nailed a few times. But I remember like one time in one of our planter boxes in Texas, I was looking at one of the things we planted and I was like, something doesn't look right about this. It was an asparagus plant. We've only tried this one time. It didn't go well, so we've never done it again. But when we first planted it, we planted it upside down. I just want you to know we are learning. We have progressed since that point. I'm just letting you know that we are not great gardeners. And this was affirmed again when our sweet neighbor in our last house that we were in, our neighbor, she is a master gardener, like truly a gardener. And she has this beautiful greenhouse and plants that just do so well. She's a widow and she just spends so much time nurturing her plants and doing all kinds of things to take care of them. So, Master Gardner, she came over to our house one time and she was looking at a bush that we have in our backyard, this massive bush. So, like, I'm 5'8". The bush grew taller than me. If I put my arm out all the way up, it's still taller. The width was huge and it was beautiful and green. It was a great bush. It was beautiful. I remember her coming over though and looking at it, and she said, she's like looking at it, she's like, that is not a bush. That is a tree. And I think I laughed. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, it's a beautiful bush. And she was so sure. She's like, no, this is a tree that is overgrown. And so, sure enough, she taught us how to trim that tree, which we thought was a bush. We had to do so much trimming. And she told us later, she's like, I think you did a little too much trimming. Um, but we just cut back all the things that we thought were correct branches on it. And it did. It turned into this really nice looking tree once you got rid of all the fluff that was on the sides. Um, anyway, I was thinking of this because later on, when we had cut it back and cut it back, and there was actual space for something back there, when my husband wanted for our family to try out chickens, we're like, we have the perfect space in our backyard now, right where that bush is. We could put it right next to the tree so the tree shades the chickens a little bit, and it's just going to be perfect. And it was a perfect space. But at first we had to do that trimming of that tree to make a space for something awesome in our life, right? And the chickens became one of my favorite things in our backyard. They became one of my favorite pets that I've ever had. And that happened, though, that great blessing, that joyful thing in my life happened because we trimmed something back. So I'm thinking of this today because, and I had a completely different episode planned today, but it just was not meshing. It was not going well. I sat down to my computer to try again with what I was working on yesterday. I'm like, it's gonna work today. But before I even opened up Word to like start working on it again, I had an impression to open a text message that I received earlier that morning. I'm like, I don't have time for this, but I'm getting faster at following promptings and impressions. Like, just try it. Just really quick. So I opened up this message. It was from a friend that I have had years and years ago in Texas. Her name is Brandy, and I love her. I love her dearly, and I'm so glad we've stayed connected. She's really good at reaching out, and she sent me a video of herself, and she just was sitting out in her backyard with her sunglasses on, and she's like, "Hey, I'm just thinking of you and feeling grateful for you." She was sitting in her backyard, and she shared a really sweet thought, and it was something so simple, right? That's a seemingly very simple thing to anyone else that probably just like, okay, that's nice. Friends do that kind of stuff. I don't usually do that. That seems very nice and thoughtful. I'm learning from my friends how to be a better friend. But I loved something that she said in it. And I re-listened to it and I paused and wrote down what she said and then paused and kept writing what she said. Um, so let me see if I can get it here. I just thought it was really sweet. So in part, this is what she said in part. Because she was thanking me for, she's like, I love my outdoor space. She took a 7-month self-care program from me some time ago, years ago. And we create a big joy goal in that course. And her big joy goal was to create a space in her backyard. I'll have to find out her exact wording, but it was a space in her backyard that she could love. Sorry, Brandy, if I'm butchering that, but that was the idea in part that I remember. So she was sitting in her backyard today, just being grateful for me in the course and having a big joy goal that she worked on. So proud of her for doing it. And then she said, I wrote it down. So it says, I was out here watering my grass, and after telling my kids that lawns are a sign of wealth, people who have money just throw away on watering the grass must have a lot of money. However, this lawn to me, so she has this little patch of grass in her backyard. She's like, this lawn to me is also home to so much life underneath that I've given. Life, like before, it was just hard dirt, but now it's soil and it's rich and it's got tons of little bugs that live in there and birds, and I'm sure other little crawling critters that come and feast on the bugs here. And I just get to watch it, and it's really, really cool. So, in my mind, my whole yard used to be lawn. And this is where kids can do cartwheels and you can do a slip and slide, right? So she's just sitting there, just being so grateful for even the little bugs. Like, usually, I told her in my response to her, I don't usually think of those kind of things. I don't usually think of the little bugs, the little things that are crawling underneath the ground and that you've given life to because you're watering that and having a grassy area. Just felt very sweet and real and genuine. And not only that, of just having a genuine moment of being grateful for something as seemingly small as grass, but it was making me reflect on. So I've moved this past summer to a new place. We have a lot of grass in our backyard. And it's interesting to me because my logical brain, part of me that understands like the facts, are like, there's so much space in my backyard. It's a beautiful area, and I should, put in that quotation marks, I should be so grateful. I have so much. I've been given so much. But currently, when I go in my backyard, I still feel a lack. I feel the lack of what I no longer have from my last place. And my last backyard was smaller, but we had spent years creating a space, right? We had spent 6 years in the last house. It's the longest we've lived anywhere in our marriage. We had spent so much time creating a space in that backyard that was just lovely. So when I go into my new backyard, even though there's a lot of beautiful aspects of it, it still feels like I'm playing pretend and that it just doesn't feel like mine. Like I haven't created a space yet that feels joyful to me. Like my friend Brandy, right? Like she did a big joy goal to make it something joyful to her in her backyard that she sits out there and loves it and loves the grass and like appreciates it, right? Like I want to get to that point, but in the meantime, I want to honor also that when I go in my backyard right now, I don't feel that. It's louder. The negative part in my brain right now is louder. And instead of feeling guilty of like, I shouldn't feel that way, I don't want to dishonor the feelings that I have inside of me because it's actually a beautiful, beautiful thing that I loved what I had created in my last place, right? I love that we had spent hours trimming that what we thought was a bush. And we made it into a tree and we created this beautiful chicken coop that and run. My husband has spent hours designing and we found library books and right, like that was all effort. And my kids helped paint it and we helped take care of it. We called it having chicky chores on Saturday. And right, like we spent time doing that. And we tried growing a garden there. We planted things not upside down and we did things that were beautiful, right? And so I'm going to honor that feeling, even though when I walk in my backyard, I feel sad, right? That's louder and I say negative because I don't like feeling sad, but I don't consider sadness a negative feeling. Like it feels negative. That's why I labeled it negative for you, just to, just for reference of for you guys to hear. But I honestly love sadness. That's a friend of mine. Sadness is a good is a good and noble feeling, I think, because it shows that I care and that I love deeply. Like I love what I created with my husband and my kids in our last space. So I honor that feeling. Um, there's this part from Elder Uchtdorf that I was finding when he said it's a talk called Grateful in Any Circumstance. And at first I was kind of annoyed by that title. Like, I don't want to be grateful in all circumstances. But that's actually a commandment, right, from our Heavenly Father. He wants us to be grateful in all things. But I love that Elder Uchtdorf explained it's not to be grateful. You don't have to like list of things to be grateful for if you don't want to. It's to be grateful in those circumstances. And sometimes when I'm really sad, I'm like, I don't feel grateful for this. Right? Sometimes in the moment, I just want to be sad. But I love, though, that I can be grateful for sadness. Like I said, I honor sadness now, a part of my life. I honor that I loved something that I created in my last backyard space. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful I can feel deeply. I'm grateful that I'm a human, right? Do you see how I'm not being like, oh, I'm grateful though that I have a backyard. I'm grateful. Like I should be grateful. See how that's just going to layer on guilt inside of you? At least it does for me. It doesn't serve me to just feel like I'm like fake it till I make it. Someone once said, faith it till you make it. Have faith in God that He's giving you those different feelings for reasons. And so when I've honored sadness and I've honored that part of me that's like, I miss those things in my life. I miss my chickens. I miss my sandbox. I miss my basketball hoop, right? I miss those things for my kids. I miss that they have those things too. And it's been very healing and kind towards myself to feel that way. Instead of, again, that feeling of, oh, I should be grateful. I should be happy right now. Like, that's okay, Cassandra. I can feel as sad as I need to for a while, right? Until that's done. Until that's done, or if it needs to last longer, that's okay too. I'm just going to honor that feeling inside of me. Um, this has made me so much think of um, a talk that at the time, when Andrew and I were just friends, he's now my husband, but when we were just friends, he sent me this talk. I think he put it on a disc for me, like a CD. You know, he like burned things on a CD. It was like an old conference talk. And so I can hear his voice sharing some of this story. His name is Hubie Brown. Let me make sure I'm saying the right name. Elder Hubie Brown. Yeah. And he served as a counselor to President David O. McKay. And you've probably heard this because I know Elder Christofferson has reshared part of his story, but I just want to read little clips of it. He says, you sometimes wonder whether the Lord really knows what he ought to do with you. You sometimes wonder if you know better than he does about what you ought to do and ought to become. And then he says, there's an incident in my life when God showed me that he knew best. And then he goes on to say when he lived in Canada, he purchased a farm and it was run down. So there was a lot of different bushes and plants that he had to trim and cut back and help out. And there was this one currant bush that he said there were no blossoms and no currants. And I was raised on a fruit farm in Salt Lake before I went to Canada, and I knew what ought to happen to that currant bush. So he said, so I got some pruning shears and I clipped it back until there was nothing left but stumps. That seems very familiar to me with that big bush in our backyard that my neighbor's like, that's supposed to be a tree. So we just clipped it back and clipped it back so far. Um, and then it's kind of playful. The next part, he says that when he was all done with that currant bush, right, he clipped it back as far as he could. And he said, I thought the currant bush was crying. And so he talked out loud and he said, what are you crying about? And then he said, I thought I heard that currant bush say this. How could you do this to me? I was making such wonderful growth. I was almost as big as the shade tree and the fruit tree that are inside the fence. And now you have cut me down. Every plant in the garden will look down on me because I didn't make what I should have made. How could you do this to me? I thought you were the gardener here. And then he said that he talked back to the currant bush and he said, again, this is just playful but fun. It has a good message though. And he says, look, little currant bush, I am the gardener here and I know what I want you to be. I didn't intend you to be a fruit tree or a shade tree. I want you to be a currant bush. When you are laden with fruit, you are going to say, oh, someday, little currant bush, when you are laden with fruit, you are going to say, thank you, Mr. Gardner, for loving me enough to cut me down. Thank you, Mr. Gardner. And then he says this other story of years later when he was serving in the British Canadian Army. And he said that he was proud of his position. And there was this opening that was going to be for him to be a general. There was an opportunity for him to become a general. And he thought, this is going to be it. This is going to be what I've hoped for and prayed for. And I'm so excited. And he got called into a commander's office. Sorry, I'm not probably not using those terms right, but he was called in there and he actually was not appointed to that position. And um, and Elder Brown just talks about how hard that was for him. He's like, that was what I've been hoping for and praying for 10 years, suddenly slipped out of my fingers. He said, with a broken heart, with bitterness in my soul, he felt like he was a failure. He clenched his fists at heaven and he shook them at heaven and said to God, right, in a prayer, like, how could you do this to me, God? I have done everything I could to measure up. There's nothing that I could have done, that I should have done, that I haven't done. How could you do this to me? I was as bitter as gall. And then I heard a voice, and I recognized the tone of this voice. It was my own voice, and the voice said, I am the gardener here. I know what I want you to do. And he said, the bitterness went out of my soul, and I fell on my knees by my cot to ask forgiveness for my bitterness. And while kneeling there, I heard a song being sung in an adjoining tent. And he said there was a number of LDS boys that were also serving with him that had gathered and were singing this song. But if by a still small voice he calls to paths that I do not know, I'll answer, dear Lord, with my hand in thine. I'll go where you want me to go. And this is neat, this next part that he says. He said, I arose from my knees a humble man, and now, almost 50 years later, I look up to him and say, thank you, Mr. Gardner, for cutting me down, for loving me enough to hurt me. I see now that it was wise that I should not become a general at that time, because if I would have been senior officer of all Western Canada, with a lifelong handsome salary, a place to live, and a pension, I would have had those things, but I would have raised my 6 daughters and my 2 sons in army barracks. They would no doubt have married out of the church, and I think I would not have amounted to anything. Many of you are going to have very difficult experiences, disappointments, heartbreak, and defeat. You are going to be tested and tried. I just want you to know that if you don't get what you think you ought to get, remember, God is the gardener here. He knows what he wants you to be. That's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And he does it so much better than me when he says it, but I love this idea of God being the master gardener, that he co-creates life with you, that you are a powerful creator and that he wants to create your life with you, that he has certain things that he can see even better than you can see. I really believe that. I believe in an all-powerful God. And so, as much as I understand and know about my own life, that he knows even more, that he's a master gardener. Just like in my last yard, how I was like, that is a beautiful bush. We're doing a great job. And how my master gardener neighbor came over and she's like, actually, that's a tree. Right? Or how we did our asparagus plants upside down. Like we just are learning, right? And there's certain things that the master gardener can know even more than we do. Um, I'm grateful to be sharing this today because um, I have really been struggling with that feeling of how the negative in my life feels louder. I'm saying negative, right? Because I'm feeling I've felt so many negative things towards like my new house and negative things towards my backyard. And underneath that negativity, because I feel like, oh, I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't like that. Underneath that negativity has been sadness, right? And we don't want to label sadness as negative, but just this deep feeling of like, I don't like certain things has felt so loud in my head and heart instead of how much I've been grateful for. And it's so interesting because I have felt guilty about it. And I've talked about guilt on the podcast before and to different people who I've coached. And I've talked about how we remove guilt and talk about the feeling underneath. So I didn't even realize that sadness was underneath all that negative talk and the negative thoughts in my head towards my house, my home, and towards like leaving my friends and the friends for my kids and such. Um, and so why I'm grateful that I paused long enough to remove guilt just so I could see the emotion underneath and realize that it was sadness, so that I could honor that part of me. I thought back to um, a time when I was pregnant with Caitlin, my middle daughter. I was so sick. I was so sick, and I carried around this little red bucket with me. This little red is a bowl, and yeah, because I just would throw up at random times while I was walking up the stairs. I need to throw up. When I was in the kitchen, I would need to throw up. And so I just had this little red bowl. I was so sick. And that was another time in my life where I felt the negative was way louder than the being grateful. Because I was like, I remember feeling in my head and my heart like, oh, I should be grateful. I'm finally pregnant because I had miscarriages and I it took me 5 years to have my daughter. So there's a part of me that's like, oh, I should be grateful. And at that time, I didn't know how to process big emotions and that I could process that with God, take off the guilt so I could see which emotion was under there. And I was so sick, right? I could give so much compassion to that part of me that just felt miserable. I felt so awful and sick. So I can show so much compassion. That's what I'm talking about again, that negative feeling sometimes is louder. It just plays really loud sometimes than sometimes the things that we feel grateful for. And I've come to realize what I came to realize was that sometimes we have to cut back those branches or God needs to trim some things in our lives in order to make space for something great. Just like that example of the big bush in our backyard that took up all that space. When we trimmed it back and made it a tree, we were able to have space for our chickens, who I came to love. For when I was pregnant with my daughter, right? I had to cut back in different areas of my life got back in callings. I had to cut back in what I was doing with my habits and things. And I just really had to focus on just surviving at that time. It was definitely survival mode in order to bring about something great. My daughter, she's one of the dearest things in my life, right? So this idea of like cutting back, and I know that as I've moved here to this new state and a new home, I have felt very similar. Like I've expressed of how I walk around sometimes my home and I'm like, it's not organized. It's not what I was hoping. It's not certain things, or this backyard's not what I want, or whatever. Or I miss my friends, all the negative things, right? But I can see how the Master Gardener has cut back things. Because when I was in Nevada, like my ministering felt like this branch that was growing beautifully. And I felt like my calling was going beautifully. And like my friends, like I was so nice to certain people, and people are so nice to me. And I just felt like I had all these branches that were growing beautifully and strong. And when I moved here, I honestly felt like I felt like those beautiful branches were cut. And I know that I can still contact my friends, and but it's different, right? And even the small things like our bedtime routines of I just feel like they've all been cut. So I feel like this tiny little cut bush, and I'm like looking up at God, um, just feeling very cut and open. And I can hear the lyrics to this song. It may not be on the mountain height or over the stormy sea. It may not be on the battle's front. My Lord will have need of me. But if by a still small voice he calls to paths that I do not know, I'll answer, dear Lord, with my hand in thine. I'll go where you want me to go. I'll go where you want me to go, dear Lord, over mountain or plain or sea. I'll say what you want me to say, dear Lord. I'll be what you want me to be. I really believe that God is the master gardener, and that he's so loving, even though I feel cut down right now in different areas of my life, and that it hurts, that it's open, that that I can have hope in a loving God that is preparing more things for my life. That is preparing, like my daughter came about from that awful pregnancy, and that the chicken coop and my chickens came from trimming back that tree. Like that really good things can happen even when we feel cut down, when the negative or the hard feels really loud in our lives. And I really hope the best for you, inner peacemaker, that if that negative feels loud in your life, or in the soon future, that you can remember the Master Gardener, and that he loves you so much, and he knows what you can become, and that he cares about you. You are important to God. Always, always, always important to him. And I know he loves you. And I'll see you next week. Thanks for listening today. Take care, inner peacemaker.